Hello, everybody. This is David Johnson with yet another installment of me talking into a camera and hoping that somebody out there kind of gives a shit or takes the time to watch it. Lord knows why. I'm still getting used to the semantics of the camera. As you can see, I haven't figured out that I need to separate my epic beard from my epic black shirt because it all turns into one big glowing orb of black. But since that's kind of, the same as my soul, we'll just run with it and see what happens. I want to talk about a topic tonight. I'm probably going to end up putting this up on both the Team Warrior Within page and the Building the Overman page because I think it's relevant to both. I think it's interesting. Um, Perhaps controversial, perhaps step on some toes, but so is the nature of the beast. I figured out by this point. I got involved in a little Facebook thread, I believe, sometime last week, and it was essentially talking about, one's self-image and one's perception of their own self-image when they are a competitor, or you don't even necessarily have to be a competitor. How about just somebody that works out a lot? And I think I pissed off a couple people, which absolutely was not my intention, but I seem to be really good at doing that either way, if you haven't figured it out. I think a lot of times just because I have some pretty unique views on things and the way that I word things, people think that I'm trying to egg them on or goad them, which a lot of time I am, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of time that's not the point. A lot of time I'm just trying to get somebody to think from a different perspective or think outside the box. And to be blunt, this is, why I don't really post much on people's Facebook accounts because it essentially ends up doing nothing but getting me in trouble and pissing off people that I have no desire to piss off. I'm not going to mention the people that were involved in the conversation for a couple reasons. Number one, they're all people that I really respect, and I think they're all good people. And even though I think I pissed them off, I think it was just a misunderstanding. If they really understood my point or kind of what I was driving at, which I'll take the responsibility for not being clear. Last thing I'm doing is trying to dredge up an old argument and prove my point. It's really not the purpose of doing this video tonight. I just want to cover it because I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's a topic worth covering for anybody that's into physique competition. So there was this thread that was thrown up a bit about basically how a competitor is just really uncomfortable inside their skin, doesn't like their body, and of course you hear that most often I think in the off season when somebody isn't shredded, when they're not at their leanest. A lot of people go through like post competition blues when they've been so disciplined and regimented and focused on this goal, and it's been the central focus of their life for months and months and months. And then they kind of fade back into quote unquote everyday life, where it's a little more ordinary. That's not to say they're not training hard. That's not to say they're not super focused, but there's no impending doom. There's no timeline like hanging over their head, which, when that timeline is hanging over your head, it kind of removes a lot of the other things that you might think about day to day because all of your energies are focused on this singular goal. Getting in this meal, getting in this cardio session, getting in this training session, getting in this posing session, sleep for 3 hours, repeat. You get the point. Anyone that's ever competed, that's just how it goes. When you're in the off season, it's a little more casual. It's a little more laid back. And it's a lot easier, I think, under those circumstances to start finding flaws with your physique. So this thread was essentially talking about how, a competitor wasn't comfortable in their skin, hadn't been the majority of their life, and several other competitors chimed in that they felt the same way. And I came in the thread and said, I've always been pretty comfortable in my skin. And, my reason for initially chiming in was simply to show that there was an alternative, because there were several people in the thread that said, oh, that's par for the course. Every one of us is uncomfortable with who we are. We know what our flaws are and we hate them. We beat ourselves up for them. And I never have. And after I pissed off these people, I spent a lot of time, probably way too much time, kind of thinking about this topic. It had been brought to my attention, this specific topic, a couple weeks prior, totally unrelated format. Another competitor that I know on Instagram took a picture of herself and took a lot of black electrical tape and made these little X's. And she put these little X's all over her body and took a picture, put the picture on Instagram, and said, this is a picture of all the things that I see on my body that I don't like, all the flaws. And the point of the post on Instagram, I believe, was to point out that even when you're an upper level competitor, I will say this actually was an IFBB pro. I respect the hell out of her, super hard worker, great competitor. But her point was to show, kind of up and coming competitors that even at the upper levels, it's pretty common to be dissatisfied with your body, to kind of dislike your body, to look in the mirror and see nothing but flaws. Now, here's the part of the video where I lose, all of you that have been listening so far. I'm going to throw this out there. In my mind, at least, that's fucked up. And I don't mean that you're a bad person. I don't mean that you're screwed for life. I mean the idea that we're supposed to accept that as competitors or people that are heavily focused on our appearance and our physiques, that it's par for the course to be dissatisfied or even possibly a little disgusted with your image in the mirror. I think there's something substantially messed up with that. I honestly do. I think if you were to speak to any psychologist, they would probably agree. And then it was pointed out in this thread, like, well, isn't that really common with physique competitors? Sure. I could come back and say, I'm pretty sure rape is pretty common with Catholic priests. That doesn't mean if your fellow Catholic priest admits to boy rape, you say, oh, gee, well, that's just part of the industry. Now, fuck that. That's messed up. And if you know something's messed up, in my opinion at least, your goal should be to work on correcting it. And I'm not saying that anybody that has self-image disorders or anything like that is rotten or screwed in the head. But paint it in slightly kinder terminology. Can we at least say that, maybe there's this aspect that isn't ideal, your self-image, and maybe you should try to find a constructive or productive way to have a better self-image over time. So I did a lot of soul searching in the coming days after this thread. I felt bad because I think I offended some people that I had no desire nor intention to offend. And like I said, good people. But I started thinking about, why don't I have these self-image disorders? And the only thing I can really think of, I've said it several times. You all know the story by now, the song and dance. I was 10 pounds at birth. My brother was 9'11". And there were not even consecutive months of my life growing up where I wasn't overweight. And I mean like pretty fat, okay? And for anybody that's really interested and wants to question the authenticity of this, please leave a comment in the video. I will be happy to post up pictures from birth, from 2 years old, from 5 years old, 13, 15. I didn't start training until I was 24. I didn't play sports. I was pretty, active as a kid, outdoors. I played a lot and we ate pretty healthy. And despite all that, I was still really overweight, most of my life. And I have all the photo documentation to prove as much. Now, luckily, I also grew up with parents who were bona fide old school hippies. Most parents, most fathers encourage their son to play sports. My father positively discouraged me from playing sports. He thought it was beneath me. He thought it was a pack mentality, a tribe mentality, which I'm not going to lie, I kind of agree with that nowadays. They were more concerned that I cultivate certain talents. I found music, and that was my main passion. I found it very, very young. I started playing the drums when I was 8. Even for years before that, I was banging on pots and pans and pretending I was a musician. So that was always my primary calling. And then I loved to write. I loved to draw. I loved all the arts. I was that little goofy arts and crafts kid that would go with my mother to like Michael's craft store and pick out some statuary to paint with my mom, stuff like that. Lord knows, 30 years later, I'd be this big bearded oaf doing these Build the Overman videos. But you get the point. I was raised in an environment where what you looked like didn't matter. It didn't matter for shit. And even then, when I got a little bit older, once you hit middle school and high school and you find your clique, my clique were the burnouts and the freaks. I started growing my hair out when I was 8 years old. And by the time I was 10, it was almost down to my butt. I looked like a chubby little girl. People mistook me for a girl. By the time I was 8, I started getting piercings. I pierced my ears. And by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, I started, piercing lips and eyebrows and you name it. And I started getting into tattooing at 15. So I was always intrigued by having a certain image. It was just never the stereotypical image. It was never the image that we're supposed to chase. I never wanted to be the all-American, blonde, blue-eyed, quarterback-looking motherfucker that was going to snag a hot piece of ass by being macho and driving a Trans Am with T-tops or something like that. Instead, I relied on other faculties, whether it was my musical talent, whether it was my personality, because Lord knows I have an award-winning personality, if you can't tell, whether it was my caustic sense of humor, my wit, my intellect, it didn't matter. We were taught, we were kind of brought up with this idea. No, let me put it a different way. We weren't brought up with any notion that appearance mattered at all, that it registered at all. And it really wasn't until I kind of got into that cliquishness early to mid high school that I realized that people cared about how they looked. By which point I was so long gone to music and my own cult, so focused on my own thing, I couldn't have given two shits about trying to conform to any other preconceived standard. So to that end, I was always overweight. Now, let me say, for the record, I was always aware of the fact that I was overweight, and I never liked it. Um, I didn't like being fat. I remember, having girlfriends and being somewhat self-aware of it. But I also remember really rapidly realizing, yeah, but being self-aware and carrying that chip outwardly is kind of more unattractive than almost just learning to wear with pride what you got, whatever it might be. So, I worked on it from a pretty young age. And I always told myself in my heart of hearts from a very young age that someday I would get in shape and I'd be a bodybuilder. I grew up watching Arnold Schwarzenegger and all those dudes. And I said, when I get older, I'm going to look like that. But it just didn't rank in my priorities. Music was so important. It took all my time. And it wasn't until I really started getting sick of the, musician life, my early 20s, that I started really looking into bodybuilding, and I made that my new endeavor, my new passion. But that said, I didn't have these overwhelming, image issues or self-loathing or anything like that. I knew that I deserved better than to be a fat kid. And I use the word better, which is an evaluative term, so I might get criticized for that. My only point is I knew I was smart. I knew that I was good at a lot of things, so why not have a body to kind of match? Not because I needed it, but because I wanted it, right? And so I set about to work and I got to it. So when I hear these individuals that are so devoted to cultivating their physiques talk about how much they dislike their physiques, their bodies, and how much it weighs on them, number one, it makes me sad. Number two, it kind of blows my mind. Like, I don't understand it. How can you choose to invest so much of your energies into something that is making you miserable? Now, you might come back and say, well, it's not making me miserable. Well, I'm just going off the words that are being put out there. Maybe you're not speaking very clearly. Maybe you're being somewhat metaphorical. There's no doubt when we get into this lifestyle and you start changing your physique, as soon as one thing starts getting better, you start noticing flaws in another area. Now, that's kind of the double-edged sword of bodybuilding or physique transformation, whatever you want to call it. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing in that it keeps you focused on continuing to make improvements, but it's a bad thing in that a lot of people tend to lose sight of the purpose of those improvements. In other words, what is the fucking point of putting all this energy into it if you can't enjoy the end product, if you can't appreciate it? If, after all your blood, sweat, and tears, you look at yourself and you can't, on some level, say, man, I'm so fucking proud of where I've gotten to. I'm so happy with what I've built. This physique, these muscles hanging off my frame are the physical representation and manifestation of hours and hours and hours of hard work, intense labor, discipline, dedication, passion. If you can't look at yourself and consciously feel that and experience that, I just think you're missing the entire point of doing this, personally. I don't see the point of putting yourself through all this if the end game is just to be like, yeah, I still look like shit. Okay. Let me use an analogy here. And I've often used the way of explaining it to people that aren't really familiar with bodybuilding. I'll tell them, I'm not yet satisfied with where I'm at, meaning I still see things that could stand to be improved. I have certain goals with my physique. I want to bring up my hamstrings, whatever. I'm not yet satisfied, but I'm very proud. Meaning, if you were to tell me tomorrow, all right, David, for whatever reason, you just have to stop training like this. The writing's on the wall. You have an illness, whatever, a chronic disease. So you got to shut it down. I could honestly say, you know what? I've had a great fucking ride, and I took it way further than I had ever intended to take it, way further than I would have ever expected I could take it. 12 years ago when I started training, I never would have assumed my genetics would have permitted me to even step on a stage, much less win a class or an overall, or hopefully this season step onto a national stage. I never had that built into my goals. I just wanted to look a little better, feel a little better, which just meant be a little less fat, be a little more muscular. How much less fat, how much more muscular? I didn't know. I had no idea what my potential was. I just knew that I wanted to move in that direction. So to me, at least, as a physique competitor, the ideal status, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, is to have that perspective where you're super proud of what you've achieved up until this point, but you're not yet satisfied. And not yet satisfied simply means you're driven to take it a little further. And when you're not driven like that, guess what? You're done. You're done pursuing the sport, if you will, in terms of trying to rise up the ranks and continue to chisel away and make those improvements to your physique. So I think a good analogy here would be one to money. Let's say, you grew up kind of broke and all of a sudden you start making some decent money and you have your first year where you get a job and you make 6 figures. That's like winning the lottery, man. And then you say, yeah, but these other people around me, they're making 7 figures. Now let's say you continue to buckle down over the course of 10 years. You're diligent, you're smart, you're disciplined. You find intelligent ways to invest. You come up with new concepts. You start a new business. Next thing you know, after 10 years of hard labor, you're in that 7-figure club. Now, if at that point, you were talking to your friend that was making 7 figures, having come from nothing, and they said to you, yeah, well, I don't know, man. I'm still not, a billionaire. I just don't think much of myself. I haven't really accomplished anything in the big scheme of things. All I do is look at my bank account and see a broke motherfucker because there's other people out there earning more. There's other people whose yachts are bigger. I mean, at what point do you look at someone and be like, man, what is wrong with you? Like, how can you not be just extraordinarily grateful on a daily basis to have the physique or the bank account in this analogy that you have? I don't care how shitty of a physique competitor you are. You're in the top 5% of fit bodies on this planet. Most people out there are either dying of some, horrible disease, or if you're in this country, you're morbidly obese, right? Those are the two sides of the coin that most people get to choose from. Here you are, you have a kick-ass physique by any objective measure, by any rational measure, and you're gonna put out there the idea that, you hate it, that all you see in the mirror is gross and flawed. I don't get it. Not only do I not get it, I think it's irresponsible. I think it's a bad message to send to anybody that's looking to get involved in the sport. I think it speaks to a certain mindset that, the individual might need to stop and think about. What is the realistic expectation? What are you hoping to get accomplished with all this and through all this? Again, maybe you're not being literal. Maybe you're being metaphorical. Maybe, for the most part, you love your body and you just wanted to whine for a few seconds. And again, I'll be really honest here. We all have moments, brief moments. I'm in contest prep right now. Nowhere near where I want to be, of course, but I still have a long time to go. So I'll strip down and I'll pose and I'll look at my physique and go, but you know what? It's a moment. It passes almost as rapidly as it enters my mind, because then I look at my physique and say, yeah, but I've improved this and I've brought up this and I never thought I would have this and that's come together nicely. And I know that if I just continue to plug away and put in the work over time, I'll get the conditioning that I need. I'll step on that stage with the best package that I've presented to date, and it will be a glorious experience. It will be nothing but positive, with none of that bullshit baggage of hating my image or hating my body or whatever. So again, I just want to put this video out there to kind of explain my thinking on the subject. If you are looking to get involved in physique competition and you already have body image issues, trust me, it's probably not going to make it better. It's probably only going to make it worse. But let me put a challenge out there. If you're involved in the sport and you do have body image issues, stop and ask yourself, do you have to? Is it necessary? Or can you possibly rethink through some of your premises on the subject and try over time to adopt a slightly different perspective? One that's going to be, I hate the term, you want to think, that's not a healthy way to think about things, but maybe a more productive way of thinking about things. Maybe a way of thinking about your body and your image and your physique that is going to justify this lifestyle that you've chosen. It's going to justify all the hard work that you've put in, all the days and, chicken breasts and step mill and all the social functions you've had to skimp out on. Because if you are in fact miserable with that end product, why are you doing this? There's so many awesome things you could be doing with your life, and you're choosing to do something that is essentially bottled up misery, dieting your ass off, doing endless cardio sessions, etc. For what? So that you can continue to be miserable? I don't know. Seems like a dead end to me. So I just want to put this out there. Anybody that kind of has that issue, I'm not saying that you're an idiot. I'm saying perhaps rethink your premises. What is it that's compelling you to pursue something that's making you miserable? Or perhaps, are you not really that miserable? You're just saying it because everybody likes to say that. All right? So again, this is David Johnson, Team Warrior Within, Building the Overman. I wrote a blog several weeks back called Embrace the Mirror. It's written on this exact subject, which is, when you look in the mirror, you might see a flaw here and there, but remember, it's very minor in the bigger scope of things. If you're getting your butt on that stage, trust me, you have a stupendous physique. You should be proud of it. You should embrace it. You should love it. And please stop loathing it, because honestly, it's painful to see. And why would you do that? All right. Talk to you next time. Peace.